After the divorce, my husband threw me out on the street without a dime. I tried to use an old card my father had left me, but the banker turned pale and shouted for me to look at the screen immediately. I was in absolute shock when I learned the truth. "Get out of here and take your trash bags with you." That was the last thing my husband said before throwing me out into the pouring rain. I was left homeless, shivering from the cold, holding nothing but a soggy cardboard box of my clothes. Desperate and starving, I walked into a bank to use a scuffed metal card my late father, a simple barber from Astoria, Queens, had left in his old wallet. I was hoping for at least $50 to rent a cheap motel room and buy a hot meal. Instead, the branch manager turned pale, locked the main doors, and whispered, "Do you have any idea what I am holding in my hands?" I nearly fainted when I saw the screen. Before I tell you how I bought the company that fired me and evicted my husband from his own mansion, let me know in the comments where you are reading this from. Like and subscribe if you've ever been underestimated by the people who were supposed to love you. My name is Maya. 30 minutes before my life fell apart, I was standing in the sprawling, custom-built kitchen of a $15 million mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut. The air was thick with the mouth-watering aromas of beef Wellington, coq au vin, and a delicate truffle puree. I had been on my feet since 4 a.m. Chopping, seasoning, braising. It was supposed to be a celebration. It was my mother-in-law Eleanor's 60th birthday, and I wanted everything to be perfect. I carefully wiped a bead of sweat from my forehead with the back of my hand so as not to ruin the plating. I was the wife of Julian, the CEO of Neurocore, one of the most promising tech startups in New York. But in this house, I often felt more like hired help than the lady of the manor. Suddenly, the double kitchen doors swung open with a bang. In marched Chloe, my husband's sister-in-law. The click-clack of her heels on the imported marble sounded like gunshots. Chloe was a petite blonde who wielded her wealth like a weapon. She was wearing an exclusive Carolina Herrera dress that probably cost more than my first car. She stopped in the middle of the room, wrinkling her nose as if she had just stepped into an open sewer. "Oh my God, Maya, are you serious?" she drawled, her voice echoing off the stainless steel appliances. She pointed a manicured finger at a tiny, almost invisible drop of sauce that had fallen near the kitchen island. I rushed over with a microfiber cloth. "I'm so sorry, Chloe. I was just plating the appetizers. It must have dripped. Let me get it." "Don't touch it," she snapped, stepping back as if I were contagious. "You're making the entire first floor smell like a cheap diner. This is a formal dinner for venture capitalists and state senators, not a block party in your little Queens neighborhood. Do you want the smell of this peasant stew soaking into my designer dress?" I flinched. It wasn't the first time Chloe had made comments like this. She loved reminding everyone that while Julian and his family had climbed the social ladder into New York's elite circles, I was still just Maya Sterling, the daughter of a neighborhood barber and a public school lunch lady. "It's Eleanor's favorite," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "She specifically asked me to use her grandmother's recipes." Chloe rolled her eyes. "She asked for that when we were planning a small family gathering. Tonight, the investors are coming. Important people. We can't have them thinking we eat like this." She walked over to the counter where I had set down a silver platter of artisanal hors d'oeuvre. With a careless flick of her wrist, she shoved the tray. It slid across the marble and crashed onto the floor. Golden crumbs and expensive sauces splattered everywhere. "Oops," she said, her face devoid of a single ounce of regret. "You need to clean that up. You better get on your knees and scrub before the guests arrive. We can't have the floor sticky when Senator Vance walks in." My hands shook as I stared at the ruined food. I had spent 2 hours perfecting those pastries. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her to get the hell out of my kitchen, but I bit my tongue. I always bit my tongue. I did it for Julian. I did it to keep the peace. I dropped to my knees and began gathering the pieces. My knees ached against the hard stone. At that moment, the side door opened. It was Eleanor, my mother-in-law. She was adjusting a diamond earring, looking regal in a floor-length silver gown. I looked up, hoping for salvation, hoping she would see Chloe standing over me with a smug smile while I cleaned up her mess, hoping she would defend me. "Eleanor, look," Chloe said, her voice instantly morphing into a sweet, concerned whine. Maya spilled food everywhere. The smell is just overpowering. I tried to tell her this menu was too heavy for an evening reception. Eleanor looked down at me. She didn't offer a hand to help me up. She didn't ask if I was okay. She just sighed, a sound of utter exhaustion and disappointment. "Maya, honestly," Eleanor said, checking her reflection in the dark glass of the oven door. "We have VIPs arriving in 15 minutes. I cannot believe you are sitting on the floor making a scene." I stood up, brushing the crumbs off my apron. "Eleanor," Chloe pushed the tray. "And this is the food you asked for. I made everything exactly the way you like it." Eleanor waved her hand dismissively. "Plans change, Maya. Tonight, we need to project an image of sophistication. Julian is announcing the IPO soon. We can't have the house smelling like a soup kitchen. It sends the wrong message. The wrong message. We need to project an image." Those words cut deep. For 10 years, I had supported Julian. I worked 2 jobs while he coded in our cramped basement. I took out loans in my name to buy his first servers. But now that he was successful, now that we lived in Greenwich, my history, my culture, and my efforts were just the wrong message. "Fine," I said, my voice tight. "I'll throw it out and set up the catered appetizers." "Excellent," Eleanor said. "And Maya, look at yourself." I looked down. I was wearing a simple but elegant navy blue dress under my apron. It was modest but clean and tailored. "What's wrong with my dress?" I asked. "It's too plain," Eleanor said, wrinkling her nose. "You look like you're going to a PTA meeting. Next to me and Chloe, you'll stick out like a sore thumb. You know the press will be here. They'll think you're part of the wait staff." Chloe giggled, covering her mouth. "Actually, that gives me an idea," Eleanor said, snapping her fingers. "One of the catering servers called in sick. We are short-staffed for the champagne circulation. Since you've already made a mess in the kitchen, why don't you help out?" I stared at her. "You want me to pass out drinks at my husband's corporate reception? On your birthday? It would really help the family, Maya," Eleanor said, that manipulative edge creeping into her tone that I knew so well. "Unless you want Julian to look bad because his guests have empty glasses. There's a spare uniform in the pantry. Black pants, white button-down. It should fit. You've put on a little weight lately anyway, so the loose fit will do you a favor." I felt tears pricking the corners of my eyes. This was a new low. They didn't just want to hide me. They wanted to put me in a uniform. They wanted to completely erase my status as Julian's wife. "I am not wearing a uniform, Eleanor," I said, my voice trembling. "I am the hostess tonight." "You'll be the hostess when you start paying the mortgage," Chloe interrupted, inspecting her nails. "Until then, you just live in Julian's house. Make yourself useful for once." Eleanor checked her Cartier watch. Enough arguing. The senator's black car is pulling through the gates. "Maya, go change immediately. Do not come out until you have a tray of champagne, and fix your hair. It's frizzy." She turned and walked out. Chloe followed close behind like a loyal lapdog. I was left alone in the kitchen, surrounded by the ruins of the food I had cooked with love. I looked at the uniform hanging on the pantry door. It was a cheap polyester shirt and baggy black slacks. I wanted to run. I wanted to grab my keys and drive away. But I thought of Julian. He had been so nervous about this initial public offering. He told me tonight would decide the fate of the company. If I made a scene, if I wasn't there to support him, he would never forgive me. I told myself I could swallow my pride one more time, just this once, for the man I loved. I walked into the pantry and changed. The shirt scratched my skin. The pants were too long. I pulled my hair into a tight, severe bun, trying to hide the texture my mother-in-law hated so much. I caught my reflection in the window. I didn't look like a CEO's wife. I looked like a ghost. I took a deep breath, picked up a heavy silver tray, and loaded it with crystal flutes of champagne. I pushed through the kitchen doors and stepped out into the grand foyer. The reception was in full swing. A string quartet played softly in the corner. Men in bespoke tuxedos and women in glittering gowns laughed and clinked glasses. The chandelier sparkled above them, casting a warm glow over everyone. Everyone except me. I moved through the crowd, offering drinks. Head down. I felt invisible. People took glasses from my tray without making eye contact, continuing their conversations as if I were a piece of furniture. Then, the heavy oak doors opened. The room fell silent. It was Julian. My heart skipped a beat. My husband is here. He'll fix this. He'll see me in this ridiculous outfit and tell his mother she went too far. He'll take the tray from my hands and tell everyone that I am his wife, his partner, his equal. Julian stepped into the light. He looked incredible in a custom midnight blue Tom Ford suit. He radiated power and confidence. But he wasn't alone. Clinging to his arm was a woman. She was young, maybe 24. Her skin was flawless, glowing under the lights. She wore a crimson silk dress that hugged every curve, slit high up her thigh. She was dazzling. She looked exactly the way Eleanor and Chloe wanted me to look. Julian flashed the crowd his trademark $1,000,000 smile. He patted the woman's hand where it rested on his forearm. "Good evening, everyone," he announced, his voice oozing charisma. "Thank you all for coming. I want to introduce you to someone very special. This is Sloane. She is the new lead investor in NeuroCore." The room erupted into applause. Chloe clapped the loudest, whispering something to Eleanor, who smiled approvingly. I froze near the staircase. The heavy silver tray shook in my hands. Lead investor? I knew the company's financials better than anyone. I had never heard the name Sloane. I had never seen any term sheets with her name on them. Julian led Sloane into the room. He leaned down and whispered something in her ear, and she threw her head back, letting out a musical, intimate laugh. It was a look of closeness I hadn't seen from him in years. He walked right past me. He looked right at me. I saw his eyes scan my waitress uniform, my scraped back hair, the tray in my hands. For a fraction of a second, our eyes met. I waited for the recognition. I waited for the outrage. Instead, he looked away. He looked at me exactly like his mother said I was, just a servant. He turned his attention back to Sloane, placing a possessive hand on the small of her back, guiding her toward the bar. My heart shattered into 1,000 pieces right there in the foyer. The champagne flutes rattled on my tray. In that moment, I realized this outfit wasn't just a disguise. It was my reality. To them, I had no value beyond what I could serve. And my husband, the man I had built from nothing, had just replaced me in front of the entire city. The applause in the grand hall was deafening. A wave of adoration washed over Julian as he stood on the sweeping staircase. He looked like a king surveying his kingdom. I stood in the shadows near the kitchen door. My hands were numb, gripping the silver tray. My feet ached in the cheap shoes Eleanor had forced me to wear, but my heart pounded with a desperate, foolish hope. This was it. The moment he would announce the IPO. All those nights I stayed up helping him debug code. All the double shifts I worked to pay for server space. The credit cards I maxed out so our electricity wouldn't get cut off during the lean years. It was all for this. Surely, now that he had made it, he would acknowledge me. He would tell these politicians and socialites that he didn't do it alone. Julian raised a glass of expensive vintage champagne. The liquid gold caught the light. To the future. His rich, commanding voice boomed. We are going to change the world. But no one builds an empire alone. My breath hitched. I took a half step forward, ready to step out of the shadows. I adjusted my ill-fitting uniform. It didn't matter what I was wearing. I was his wife. I was his partner. I want to propose a toast, Julian continued, sweeping his gaze across the crowd. To the inspiration behind my success. To the woman who embodies the future of this company. The woman who stands beside me not just as a supporter, but as a symbol of where we are going. The room quieted. I saw Eleanor in the front row clutch her pearls, a smug smile playing on her lips. Chloe was laughing, whispering to her husband. I looked at Julian, willing him to meet my eyes. To Sloane, he said, turning to the woman in the red dress beside him. The air was knocked out of my lungs as if I'd been punched. Sloane. A girl he had just met. A girl who was barely older than our relationship itself. Julian wrapped his arm around her waist and pulled her flush against him. Sloane smiled a camera-ready smile and raised her glass. Then, in front of everyone, his mother, his investors, his employees, and his wife, he leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't a friendly peck. It was a claim of ownership, a passionate, lingering kiss that signaled intimacy and possession. The room erupted in polite cheers and clapping. Camera flashes blinded me. I felt the floor drop out from under me. I dropped the tray. The sound of crystal shattering against the marble floor rang out like a gunshot. Cutting through the applause, dead silence fell over the room. Every head turned back toward the help. Julian broke the kiss and looked up. A flash of irritation crossed his face. When he saw it was me, his expression didn't soften. It hardened into something cold and unrecognizable. "Excuse me for a moment," he said smoothly to the crowd. His charm never faltering. "Just a minor staff issue." He marched across the room, grabbing my arm with a grip so tight it would undoubtedly leave a bruise. He didn't say a word as he dragged me out of the hall, past the staring guests, down the corridor, and into his private study. He shoved me inside and slammed the heavy oak door, throwing the deadbolt with a click that echoed in the sudden quiet. The study was magnificent, lined with mahogany bookcases, smelling of expensive leather and ambition. It was a room I had decorated. A room paid for by my bonus from my second job 3 years ago. Julian walked over to his massive desk and picked up a thick manila envelope. He turned to me, his face devoid of any of the warmth he had just shown that stranger. "You embarrassed me," he said in a low, dangerous voice. "You dropped a tray in front of Senator Vance. Do you have any idea how clumsy and low-class that looks?" I stared at him, tears streaming down my face. "I embarrassed you? You just kissed another woman in front of the whole city. You toasted to her as the key to your success. I am your wife, Julian. I built this company with you. I fed you when we had nothing. That's the past, Maya," he snapped, tossing the envelope onto the desk. It slid across the polished wood and stopped right in front of me. "And this is the future." I looked down. The document peeking out of the envelope was titled, "Petition for Dissolution of Marriage." Divorce papers. "What is this?" I whispered. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely touch the paper. "It's exactly what it looks like," Julian said, leaning against the desk and crossing his arms. "I'm filing for divorce. My lawyers drew this up weeks ago. I was going to wait until after the IPO, but your little stunt in the kitchen today, and now this disaster in the foyer, forced my hand." "Why?" I asked, my voice cracking. "Is it because of her? Sloane? It's not just her. It's not us. Or rather, it's you." He sighed, looking at me with a mix of pity and disgust. "Look at yourself. You're wearing a waitress uniform. Your hair is a mess. You have sauce under your fingernails. You made me wear this," I screamed. "Your mother forced me to work the party." "Because that's where you belong, Maya," he shouted back. "Don't you get it? You're a workhorse. You were great when we were surviving in Queens. You were great when I needed someone to pinch pennies and balance the books in the background. But I am a CEO now. I am about to be the billionaire face of a tech empire. I need a wife who matches that energy." He walked over to a mirror on the wall and adjusted his tie. "I need an image of status. Maya, Sloane is a known model. She has a degree from Stanford. She speaks French. She knows how to walk in heels without tripping. She is an asset. You are a liability. You are too plain. Too domestic. Too ordinary. I felt like I was suffocating. The man I had sacrificed everything for was telling me I was being fired from my own marriage because I didn't fit the public relations profile. I won't sign this, I said, pushing the papers away. I won't let you throw me away like garbage. I own half of everything, Julian. Half of this house, half of the company. Under New York law, marital assets are split. You can't just replace me. Julian laughed. It was a cruel, dry sound. Oh, Maya, you really should have read what you were signing. What are you talking about? Remember 6 months ago, when we refinanced the house to get capital for the expansion? You signed a stack of documents. You trusted me. I felt a cold pit form in my stomach. Yes, you said it was for the commercial bridge loan. It was, he said, smirking. But buried in that stack was a post-nuptial asset forfeiture agreement. You signed away your rights to this property and the company. The original incorporation documents had you as a silent partner, but the restructuring agreement you signed last year converted your equity into non-voting shares with a buyout clause in the event of a divorce. I can buy you out for pennies. My knees buckled. I grabbed the back of a leather chair to keep from falling. He had planned this. He had been planning this for months. Maybe years. While I was cooking his meals and washing his clothes, he was legally erasing me from our life. You tricked me, I whispered. You stole everything from me. I did what I had to do to protect the assets, he said coldly. Now, pick up a pen and sign the papers. If you sign right now, I'll wire you $50,000 to help you get an apartment. If you fight me, I will drag you through the courts until you are bankrupt and living under a bridge. I looked at the pen on the desk. It was an exclusive Mont Blanc pen I had bought him for our 5th anniversary. I looked at the man standing in front of me. This wasn't the Julian I knew. This was a stranger in an expensive suit. No, I said, straightening my spine. I will not sign, and I am not leaving my house. It's not your house, Maya, he snarled. It is my house, and if you don't sign, you are trespassing. He walked over to the door and unlocked it. I'm not going anywhere, I said, though my voice shook. Fine, he said. Have it your way. He grabbed my arm again, even rougher this time. He dragged me out of the study and toward the back service entrance. Julian, stop, I screamed, trying to pull away. He ignored me. He shoved the back door open. Outside, the heavens had opened up. It was pouring rain, sheets of water flooding the asphalt. Lightning illuminated the backyard. He shoved me hard. I tripped over the threshold and fell hard onto the wet concrete of the driveway. The rain soaked through my waitress shirt in seconds. I gasped, the freezing water shocking my system. He threw a cardboard box of my old clothes, the ones I kept in the garage, out after me. It landed in a puddle, the water immediately soaking into the cardboard. You want to act like trash? Then go with the trash, he spat. Don't come back until you're ready to sign. He slammed the door. I heard the deadbolt click into place. I was alone in the dark, in the pouring rain, with nothing but the clothes on my back and a box of soggy memories. I pounded on the door, screaming his name, but the thumping bass of the party inside drowned me out. I was locked out of the life I had built, while inside, my husband celebrated his future with a woman who fit his status. The rain wasn't just falling, it was punishing me, driving into my skin like ice needles as I scrambled to gather the few belongings that had spilled from the ruined cardboard box. My old NYU hoodies, a pair of worn sneakers, and a framed photo of my father lay scattered on the asphalt, soaking up the filthy water. I dropped to my knees, scraping them against the rough concrete, trying to shield the picture frame with my body, but the glass had already shattered. A web of cracks ran right across my father's smiling face. It felt like a bad omen, as if the last solid thing in my life had finally broken under the weight of my husband's betrayal. The music inside the mansion was muffled now, mocking me from the warmth I was no longer allowed to enter. I reached for a soaked sweater, trying to wring it out, when a harsh, white beam of light blinded me. I squinted, throwing a hand up to shield my eyes, thinking maybe Julian had come to his senses and turned on the floodlights to help me. But the light was moving, dancing around me with predatory jerks. I blinked, my eyes adjusting, and saw Chloe standing under the awning of the service entrance. She was completely dry, her couture gown untouched by the storm. She was holding her latest iPhone, pointing it directly at me. The light was her camera flash, and a little red dot indicated she was streaming live. "Look at this, guys," Chloe said, her voice shrill and theatrical for her digital audience. "I told you this charity case wouldn't last. Look at her in the mud, right where she belongs." It's honestly so sad when people try to punch above their weight class. This is what happens when the help forgets they're the help. I scrambled to my feet, clutching the wet box to my chest, trying to turn away from the camera. But Chloe stepped closer, staying just under the cover of the awning, zooming in on my misery. "Say hi to the girls, Maya," she sneered. "Everyone is watching. We're actually taking bets on where you're going to sleep tonight." I put my money on a park bench, but Sloan thinks you'll crawl back to whatever Queen's housing project Julian dragged you out of. "Chloe, please stop," I begged, my voice barely carrying over a crack of thunder. "I just want my things." "Oh, look." "She's crying." Chloe laughed, reading the comments scrolling up her screen. Someone just commented that the spell wore off, and Cinderella is being sent back to the scullery. Exactly. The pumpkin carriage left. "You're just a pumpkin now, sweetie." The back door opened again and Julian stepped out. He held a massive golf umbrella over his head, protecting his suit from a single drop of rain. In his hand, he held a set of keys. For a fleeting second, I thought he was bringing me the keys to my car. The black Rivian SUV I had driven for the last 3 years. The car I used to drive him to meetings. The car I used to pick up his dry cleaning. The car I thought was mine. He stopped next to Chloe, glanced at her phone screen, and saw himself. He adjusted his lapel, flashing a quick, charming smile for the live stream, before turning his cold, dead eyes to me. "I need the key fob, Maya," he said, holding his hand out palm up. I stared at him, rainwater dripping from my nose. "That's my car, Julian. It's registered to me." "It's registered to the company, actually," he corrected in a bored tone. "Another asset protection measure. And since you are no longer an employee or a shareholder of Neurocore, as of 20 minutes ago, you do not have authorization to operate company vehicles." "Hand it over." I reached into my pocket, my fingers numb and clumsy. I pulled out the heavy leather fob. It felt warm in my hand, the last piece of my life that felt tangible. He snatched it without letting his skin touch mine, as if contact would contaminate him. He tossed something else into my hand. It was a single, jagged metal key with a faded plastic tag. I looked at it in confusion. It was the key to my old 1998 Honda Civic, the car I drove in college, the car that had been sitting under a tarp behind the garage for 5 years. It had 2,000,000 miles on it and no air conditioning. "I kept it around to haul bags of mulch for the gardeners," Julian said, twirling the Rivian fob around his finger. "I think it still starts. Consider it a severance package. It's more than you deserve after the scene you caused tonight." "You can't do this," I whispered. "That car might not even make it to the highway." "Then you better start walking," he said. "Oh, and one more thing." He pulled out his phone and tapped the screen a few times. A notification pinged on my phone, buried somewhere in my wet pocket. "I just canceled the Amex," he said casually, flashing the screen at me. "And I froze the joint checking account until the divorce is finalized. My lawyer advised securing all liquid assets so you don't drain the marital funds. So don't try checking into the plaza on my dime. You're on your own now. Start counting your pennies." I frantically dug my phone out to check my banking app, my wet fingers slipping on the screen. When it finally loaded, I was staring at zeros. Account frozen. Card declined. Access denied. I had nothing. No cash, no credit, no access to the money I helped him make. Chloe laughed again. That shrill, cruel sound cutting through the rain. "Oh my God! Did you see her face?" she said to her phone. She actually thought she was going to go shopping on Julian's black card. The entitlement of these people is insane. "Get off my property, Maya," Julian said, turning back toward the warmth of the house. "If you are still here in 5 minutes, I will call the Greenwich police and have you arrested for trespassing. And trust me, after the psychotic break you threw tonight, the officers will be more than happy to haul a hysterical woman off my estate." He wrapped his arm around Chloe and guided her back inside. She blew a kiss to the camera before the heavy door slammed shut, leaving me in total darkness. The click of the deadbolt was the loudest sound in the world. I stood there for a moment, letting the rain wash away the last of my dignity. I was shaking violently now, my teeth chattering. I looked at the rusted key in my hand. It was the only thing I had left. I trudged around the side of the property, dragging the soggy box of clothes through the mud. The old Civic was parked behind the garden shed, covered in a layer of grime and dead leaves. I had to use my sleeve to wipe the sludge off the driver's side window just to see inside. It smelled like mildew and stale gasoline. I threw the box onto the passenger seat and climbed in. The vinyl seat was freezing and hard. I slid the key into the ignition and turned it. The engine sputtered, coughed, and died. "Please!" I begged, slamming my hands against the steering wheel. "Please, just start." I tried again. The engine let out a high-pitched, protesting whine, refusing to wake from its long slumber. I pumped the gas pedal, praying to a god I wasn't sure was listening. Finally, with a plume of black exhaust and a violent shudder, the car roared to life. The check engine light glowed an ominous red on the dashboard, and the fuel needle rested right on the empty line. I shifted into gear, and the car lurched forward, its suspension groaning. I drove down the long, winding driveway, past the rows of luxury cars parked for the gala Bentleys, Maybachs, exclusive sports cars, and me in my rattling, rusted Honda. As I reached the security gates at the end of the drive, I looked in the rearview mirror. The mansion glowed on the hill, a beacon of wealth and power. I could see silhouettes moving in the windows, people dancing, drinking, celebrating. My husband was in there, probably raising another glass to his freedom. Chloe was in there, showing her friends the video of me on my knees in the mud. I hated them. I hated them with a clarity that was terrifying. But underneath the hate was a crushing wave of fear. I pulled onto the main road. The windshield wipers smeared the rain rather than clearing it. I had no money, no home, no family to call. My father was dead and my mother had passed away when I was a teenager. I was completely alone in a world that worshipped money, and I didn't have a single cent to my name. I drove aimlessly for miles, heading toward the city, my tears mixing with the condensation on the windows. The low fuel light began to flash a warning that my time was running out. I needed shelter. I needed food. I needed a miracle. And then I remembered the wallet. My father's old leather wallet that I had shoved into the glove compartment of this very car years ago. He had told me to keep it for an emergency. I reached over and yanked the glove box open. It spilled out old insurance papers and a tire pressure gauge. And there it was, cracked brown leather, dusty and forgotten. I grabbed it with trembling fingers. I didn't know what I expected to find. Maybe a hidden $50 bill. Maybe just old receipts. I pulled under a flickering street lamp near a closed gas station and opened the wallet. There was no cash. My heart sank. But tucked into the back slot, behind a childhood photo of me, was a card. It wasn't a credit card. It was heavy, made of solid black metal, with no numbers on the front, just a gold EMV chip and my father's signature engraved in silver. Arthur Sterling. I stared at it. My father was a barber. He cut hair for $20 a pop. He lived in a 2-bedroom apartment in Queens his whole life. What was this? It felt like a novelty item, a prop, but it was cold and substantial in my hand. I had nothing else. No other options. The gas gauge was on 0. My stomach was twisting with hunger cramps. I looked up and saw a bank across the street. The lights of the 24-hour ATM lobby shone in the darkness. It was a long shot. A desperate, foolish chance. But it was the only chance I had. I put the car in drive and pulled across the street. I didn't know it then, but stepping out of that car in the rain, clutching that mysterious metal card, I wasn't just walking into a bank. I was walking into a new life. And Julian and Chloe were about to realize they had made a very, very expensive mistake. The cold woke me before the sun did. It was a bone-deep chill that seeped through the thin upholstery of the car seat and settled in my marrow. I curled into a tight ball, pulling my knees to my chest, trying to preserve whatever body heat I had left. But the old Civic was little better than a metal icebox. My breath fogged the windows, creating a barrier between me and the harsh reality of the Target parking lot in Yonkers. I rubbed a circle in the condensation and peered out. The world was gray and bleak. A security patrol car was making its slow rounds, its yellow lights cutting through the morning mist. I ducked down, terrified the guard would spot me, tap on the glass, and force me to move. Yesterday, I was the wife of a tech CEO. Today, I was homeless, hiding in a 24-hour parking lot. My stomach gave a violent spasm, a sharp reminder that I hadn't eaten anything since a piece of toast at 4 a.m. the previous day. Hunger was a physical pain, a hollowness that made my hands shake. I checked the clock on the dashboard. 6:30 a.m. My mouth tasted like copper. I sat up, my joints popping, and looked in the rearview mirror. I barely recognized the woman staring back at me. My hair had escaped its tight bun in frizzy, matted strands. My eyes were swollen from crying, and there was a streak of mud across my cheek from falling in the driveway. I looked exactly how Chloe had described me. Broken and worthless. I reached for the glove box again, needing something to hold on to that felt like love. I pulled out my father's wallet. Its edges were soft from use, the leather cracked from years of sitting in his back pocket while he stood on his feet for 10 hours a day. I opened it and inhaled deeply. The scent was faint, but it was there. Aftershave, talcum powder, and peppermint. The smell of Arthur's barbershop. I closed my eyes and transported myself back there. The checkerboard linoleum, the buzz of electric clippers, the sound of old jazz playing softly on the radio. My dad was a giant of a man, with hands as rough as sandpaper but gentle enough to trim a child's hair without waking them. He wasn't a rich man, or at least, I had always thought so. We lived in a tiny apartment. He drove a truck older than I was. He wore the same gray work shirts every day. I remembered the day I brought Julian home to meet him. It was 10 years ago. Julian was a slick talker even then, wearing a fake designer belt and bragging about his grand plans to revolutionize the tech industry. My father sat in his barber chair, snapping a towel out, watching Julian with all-seeing eyes. Later, when Julian stepped outside to take a call, my dad turned to me, brushing hair off his shoulders, and looked me dead in the eye. "That boy is all paint, Maya," he said, his voice rumbling like distant thunder. "What do you mean, Dad?" I asked defensively. "I mean he's all surface. He shines real pretty when the light hits him, but he's got no foundation. Scratch the paint, and there's nothing underneath but cardboard and rot." "Dad, stop," I argued. "He's going to be successful. He has a vision." "Vision is cheap," Arthur said. "Character is what costs. Don't let a nice coat of paint fool you, kid. Value isn't what you see on the outside. Real value is in the foundation, in the dirt, in the things that won't blow away when the storm comes." I had ignored him. I thought he was just an old man who didn't understand the modern world. I thought he was intimidated by Julian's ambition. Now, sitting in a freezing car with no home and no husband, I realized my father was the smartest man I ever knew. He saw the rot in Julian before I saw the shine. I looked at the wallet in my hands. It was the only thing he left me when he died suddenly of a heart attack 4 years ago. I had been so busy building neurocore with Julian that I hadn't even grieved properly. I just took the wallet, shoved it in the glove box, and promised myself I would look through it later. Later was now. I opened the empty wallet. No cash. Just a few receipts from Home Depot and a picture of my mom, who had passed away when I was 12. I rubbed my thumb over her face, feeling a fresh wave of grief. Then, I noticed a hidden slit behind the ID window. Stuffed deep inside was something rigid. I wedged my fingernail in, and it slid out, dropping into my lap. It was the card, unlike any I had seen before. Heavy. Cold to the touch, made of solid black metal. No raised numbers. No expiration date. No bank logo. Just a small, intricate gold chip on the front, and my father's signature, Arthur Sterling, etched in silver. On the back, there was a magnetic strip and a single phone number printed in tiny gold font. I turned it over in my hands. It felt important, significant, but it made no sense. My dad didn't have credit cards. He paid for everything in cash. He didn't trust banks. He kept his savings in a coffee can under the sink. Or at least, that's what I thought. A novelty club card? A keepsake? My stomach growled loudly. Painfully. I didn't care what it was. I just hoped it was tied to an account that had $20 in it, enough for breakfast and a hot coffee. I needed to get warm, and I needed to figure out how to survive. I looked out the window. Across the parking lot, past the highway overpass, I could see the Manhattan skyline rising in the morning mist. And right on the edge of the financial district was a branch of Apex Heritage Bank, the largest and most prestigious bank in the city. Julian banked there. I had gone with him once to sign papers, feeling small and out of place in the marble lobby while he joked with the wealth managers. It was a ghost of a chance. A desperate, stupid probability, but I had a car key with no gas and a stomach that was eating itself. I had to try. I waited until 8:30 a.m. when the Wall Street branch opened its doors. I tried to fix my hair in the rearview mirror, smoothing down the flyaways with spit, trying to look less like a woman who had slept in her car. I brushed the dried mud off my pants as best as I could. I took the black card and stepped out into the biting morning air. The walk to the bank felt like a march to the gallows. My legs were weak, and my head felt light. As I approached the heavy glass doors, I saw a security guard standing just inside. He was tall, stern-faced, arms crossed over his chest. He watched me approach, his eyes scanning my wrinkled clothes, my dirty shoes, the desperation in my stride. I held my head high, channeling whatever dignity I had left. I am Maya Sterling, I told myself. I belong here. I pulled the door open. The guard stepped forward, blocking my path. "Can I help you, miss?" he asked, his tone making it clear he didn't believe I belonged inside. "The lobby is for bank clients only. I am a client." I lied, my voice raspy. "I need to make a withdrawal. Do you have an account here?" he asked skeptically. I held up the black metal card. It caught the morning light, gleaming with a strange, dark luster. "I have this," I said. The guard looked at the card and frowned. He clearly had never seen one like it before. He looked back at me, calculating the discrepancy between the expensive piece of metal and the woman holding it. "Please," I said softly. "I just need to use the ATM in the foyer." He hesitated, then stepped aside, likely deciding the trouble of an argument wasn't worth it. "Machine is on the right," he muttered. I walked past him, the cold air conditioning of the bank hitting my face. The lobby was quiet, smelling of money and floor polish. I approached the ATM in the corner, my heart hammering against my ribs. I slid the heavy black card into the reader. The machine whirred. It made a mechanical, grinding sound. I waited for the screen to prompt me for a PIN. I didn't know the PIN. I hadn't even thought of that. Panic gripped my chest. If it asked for a code, I was done for. But it didn't ask for a PIN. Instead, The screen went black for a terrifying second. Then, it flashed a bright, alarming red. Bold white letters appeared on the screen. System alert. Do not remove card. I initiate branch manager protocol immediately. Code 0. My breath hitched. Code 0. This is bad. This is a stolen card. My dad found it somewhere. I'm going to be arrested. The machine started emitting a loud, rhythmic beeping that echoed through the quiet lobby. Heads turned. Tellers behind the glass looked up. The security guard spun around, his hand dropping toward his utility belt. Miss, step away from the machine! The guard barked, moving toward me. I tried to pull the card out, but the machine had swallowed it. I couldn't leave it. It was all I had. I yanked at the slot, panic rising. I can't, I said. It took my card. Suddenly, a door deep inside the bank burst open. A man in an immaculate gray suit rushed out. He wasn't walking, he was sprinting. He looked frantic. He saw me at the ATM, saw the flashing red light on the screen, and the color drained completely from his face. Stop! He yelled at the guard. Do not touch her. He reached me, out of breath, a sheen of sweat on his forehead. He looked at the screen, then at me, then at the card slot. He pulled a master key from his pocket, inserted it into the machine, and manually ejected the card. He caught it in his hand like a sacred relic. He looked at the signature on the front. Arthur Sterling. He looked up at me, his eyes wide with shock and something that looked a lot like fear. Ma'am, he said, his voice trembling. Please, come with me immediately. We need to get you to the vault. It's not safe out here. I stared at him, confused and terrified. I just wanted $50, I whispered. $50? He repeated, looking at me like I was insane. Ma'am, do you have any idea what you are holding in your hands? He didn't wait for an answer. He ushered me toward a heavy steel door in the back. The guard was now following us, looking completely bewildered. I had no idea what was happening, but as I walked past the staring staff and deeper into the bowels of the bank, I got the sinking feeling that my father, the humble barber from Queens, had been keeping a secret that was about to turn the world upside down. The heavy oak door of the manager's office clicked shut, cutting off the hum of the lobby and the curious stares of the clientele. The silence inside was immediate and thick, smelling of lemon polish and old money. I stood by the door, rainwater dripping from my clothes onto a Persian rug that probably cost more than my entire college tuition. I hugged my arms, shivering not just from the cold, but from the terrifying certainty that I was about to be arrested in handcuffs. The man in the gray suit, whose desk placard read Harrison Caldwell, branch vice president, was pacing back and forth behind his desk. He held my father's black metal card in a white handkerchief, as if it were a radioactive isotope. A young woman in a sharp blazer burst into the room without knocking. She looked at me with undisguised disgust, her eyes sweeping over my mud-stained pants and wet, frizzy hair. Mr. Caldwell, she said in a shrill, urgent voice. I have corporate security on the line. A silent alarm was tripped at the ATM. Do you want her escorted out the back? Or are we holding her until the NYPD arrives? She sneered at me. That card is obviously a counterfeit. We have no record of any retail account using that hardware. I pressed myself against the wall. This is it. I'm going to jail. I'm going to be the crazy homeless woman who tried to rob Wall Street with a fake card. I looked at Mr. Caldwell, waiting for him to nod, waiting for the cuffs. Instead, Caldwell slammed his hand down on the desk. It was a loud, sharp crack that made both his assistant and me jump. Cancel security, he barked, his face flushing red. And if you ever speak about a guest of this bank in that tone again, you will be looking for employment elsewhere. This is not a police matter. This is a code 0. Do you understand me? Code 0. The woman's jaw dropped. She looked from him to me, her arrogance evaporating into sheer confusion. Code 0? But Mr. Caldwell. That protocol hasn't been active in out, Caldwell ordered, pointing to the door. And bring us water. In crystal. Immediately. She fled the room, shutting the door quietly behind her. Caldwell took a deep breath, adjusting his tie, and turned to me. His expression wasn't angry. It was awestruck. It was the look of a deeply religious man who had just found an angel sitting in his living room, even if that angel was covered in mud. Please, Miss Sterling, have a seat, he said, gesturing to a high-backed leather chair. I apologize for the reception. We simply didn't expect you. We didn't think this card would ever be activated. I sat down carefully, afraid of ruining the leather. I don't understand, I whispered, my voice shaking. It's just my dad's old card. He was a barber. I just needed money for food. I didn't mean to cause a problem. Caldwell walked around the desk and sat on the edge of it, putting himself at eye level with me. He looked at the card in his hand, running his thumb over the signature. Your father was Arthur Sterling, he said softly, owner of Artie's barbershop in Astoria. Yes, I said, tears pricking my eyes again. He died 4 years ago. I know, Caldwell said. I stood in the back at the funeral. You wouldn't have noticed me. There were too many people. I blinked. You knew my dad? Maya. May I call you Maya? He asked. I nodded. Maya, your father was not just a barber. That barbershop was his cover. Yes, he cut hair there, but it wasn't his livelihood. He stood up and walked over to a large, framed map of Manhattan on the wall behind his desk. It was a zoning map, color-coded by district. He pointed to a massive swath of the center, covering the financial district, the new Hudson Yards tech corridor, and historic blocks in Tribeca that were currently skyrocketing in value. In the late 80s and throughout the crashes of 2001 and 2008, when everyone was panic selling property for pennies to get liquid cash, your father was buying, Caldwell said. He bought empty lots. He bought abandoned warehouses. He bought apartment blocks that were slated for demolition. He bought them through shell companies and blind trusts. My father, the man who clipped coupons for groceries? The man who drove an old truck until the wheels fell off? He believed in the dirt, Caldwell continued. He used to tell me, Harrison, they can print money, but they can't print dirt. He held onto everything. He never sold a single square foot. He leased it. 99-year ground leases. Caldwell turned to me, his eyes piercing. Maya, do you know the building in Hudson Yards where NeuroCore is headquartered? The glass tower? Yes, I said. Julian loves that building. He says it costs him $500,000 a month in rent, but it's worth it for the prestige. Caldwell smiled, a tight, secretive smile. Your husband pays $500,000 a month to a management firm called Apex Holdings. Do you know who is behind it? I shook my head, my heart pounding in my ears. Arthur Sterling, Caldwell said. Your husband has been paying rent to your father for 5 years, and now he pays it to you. The room spun. I gripped the armrests of the chair. My dad was Julian's landlord? He owns the block, Caldwell corrected. He owns the dirt under the stadium. He owns the land under this very bank branch. We pay rent to the trust. That card you gave me isn't a debit card, Maya. It's the master key to the Sterling Sovereign Trust. It's the vehicle your father set up to consolidate all his real estate holdings and liquid assets. He designed it so it would only activate when his heir you physically presented the key. He wanted to make sure you were ready. He wanted to make sure you needed it. I don't believe you, I mumbled. If he had all this money, why did we live like that? Why did he let me struggle? Why did he let me work 2 jobs to support Julian? Because he was terrified, Caldwell said sadly. He saw what money did to people. He saw it destroy families. He wanted you to forge your own character first. He wanted you to find a man who would love you for you, not for the empire you would inherit. He told me once, if she marries a man who will grind in the dirt with her when she has nothing, she can give him the world. But if she marries a leech, I need her to have the power to salt the earth. Salt the earth. It sounded exactly like my dad. Caldwell walked back to his desk and sat in front of his computer. He slotted the black card into a specialized reader that looked more like military hardware than banking equipment. He typed in a sequence of codes. The trust has been accumulating compound interest and lease payments for the 4 years since his death, Caldwell said, his fingers flying across the keyboard. It's an investment fund with tax-exempt status on the retained earnings. The sum is substantial. He turned the monitor so I could see it. I looked at the screen. I saw a number. It was long. There were too many zeros. At first, my brain refused to process it. I thought it was an account number. Is that the routing number? I asked. My voice barely a whisper. Caldwell shook his head. No, Miss Sterling. That is the cash balance available for immediate withdrawal. The real estate assets are valued separately, but they appraise at over $4 billion. This is just the cash. I looked again. 6,845万美元. The room went completely dark for a second. $68 million. And I had slept in a car because I couldn't afford a motel. Your husband threw you out because he thought you were poor, Caldwell said quietly, watching my face. He left you for an investor because he needed capital. Maya, you are the capital. You could buy his entire company tomorrow morning out of petty cash, and you wouldn't even notice a dent in your balance. I felt a laugh building in my chest, but it came out sounding like a sob. I covered my mouth with my hands. My dad. My quiet, humble dad who swept hair off the floor, owned the city, and left it all to me, hidden in a glove box, waiting for the moment I was desperate enough to find it. So, Caldwell asked, his voice professional, but with a dangerous edge of excitement. What would you like to do, Miss Sterling? Would you like to withdraw $50 for breakfast? I looked at the screen again. I remembered Julian in his bespoke suit, laughing as he threw my clothes into the mud. I remembered Chloe live-streaming my humiliation. I remembered the divorce papers and the postnup I had foolishly signed. They thought they had won. They thought they had broken me. I sat up straight and wiped the dirt off my cheek. I looked at Harrison Caldwell, and for the first time in 24 hours, my eyes were dry. No, Harrison, I said, my voice adopting a new steel. Something that sounded like Arthur Sterling's daughter. I don't want breakfast. I want to see NeuroCore's credit files, and then I want you to call my father's lawyer. Not just any lawyer. I want the shark he used. Caldwell smiled and picked up his phone. Alistair Montgomery is on my speed dial. He's been waiting for this call for 4 years. While he dialed, I looked out the window at the Manhattan skyline towering in the distance. It looked different now. It didn't look like a fortress that had locked me out. It looked like a chessboard. And I had just been handed the queen. Julian wanted a status image. I was going to give him a downfall he would never survive. The game had just changed, and they didn't even know I was playing. The door to the manager's office opened again, but this time there was no frantic energy. Only a heavy, dignified silence that seemed to possess the room before the man even entered. Harrison Caldwell stood up immediately, adjusting his jacket with a reverence I hadn't seen him show anyone else. The man who walked in looked like he was carved out of granite and old money. Ikede. That's on the late 70s with snow-white hair swept back from a face lined with shrewd intelligence. He wore a navy pinstripe suit that screamed Savile Row, and he carried a battered leather briefcase that seemed incongruous with his immaculate appearance until I realized it matched the worn wallet I was still clutching in my hand. He didn't look at Caldwell. His pale blue eyes locked onto me, instantly softening with an emotion that looked painfully like grief. He walked straight up to me, ignoring the bank manager's outstretched hand, and stopped just at the edge of my personal space. Maya, he said in a deep baritone that sounded like it belonged in the Supreme Court. You have your mother's eyes. But right now, seeing you is like looking at a ghost. I stood up, feeling small in my muddy clothes next to this titan of industry. Who are you? I am Alistair Montgomery, he said. setting the briefcase on the desk with a heavy thud. "I was your father's attorney for 40 years. I am the executor of the Sovereign Trust, and I have been waiting for you to walk through that door since the day we buried him." Caldwell poured a glass of water for the newcomer, his hands shaking slightly. Montgomery sat down, snapped open his briefcase, and pulled out a thick manila folder that simply had my name on it. He slid it across the desk toward me. "Your father was a genius, Maya," Montgomery began, folding his hands over the folder. "But he was also paranoid. He knew what money did to people. He saw it destroy his own brothers back in the 90s when the first real estate deals closed. He swore he would never let that happen to you. He told me he was broke," I whispered, running my hand over the folder. "I paid for his medication. I picked up double shifts at the diner to buy his headstone." Montgomery nodded, his expression grim. It was a test. It was the hardest thing he ever did. "He sat in my office and cried the day you took that second job. He wanted to give you the world, Maya. But he needed to know you could survive without it. And more importantly, he needed to know who would stand beside you when the well ran dry." He looked at the empty chair next to me, the place where a husband should have been. "He knew about Julian, didn't he?" I asked, the realization settling in my stomach like lead. "He ran a full background check on Julian the week you brought him home to meet him," Montgomery said smoothly. "He knew about the credit cards Julian had maxed out and hid from you. He knew about the exaggerated university credentials. He knew that Julian didn't see a partner in you. He saw a stepping stone. Arthur told me, if this boy thinks she is poor and stays anyway, maybe I'm wrong. But if he thinks she is rich, he will suck the blood right out of her and leave a hollow shell." I felt a tear slip down my cheek. Dad knew. He watched me struggle. He watched me build NeuroCore with my sweat and tears. It was all to protect me from the exact moment I was living right now. "He wasn't just watching, Maya," Montgomery said, his voice hardening. "Arthur was a strategist. He knew that if Julian ever became successful, he would try to cut you loose. So, your father bought an insurance policy." He flipped the folder open. Inside were stacks of financial documents, loan agreements, and promissory notes. I saw the NeuroCore logo on the top page. "What is this?" I asked. For the last 5 years, every time Julian needed capital for expansion, every time he needed a bridge loan to make payroll or buy servers, he went to a private equity firm called Apex Investments, Montgomery explained. Julian thought he was dealing with a faceless conglomerate. He didn't know Apex was a subsidiary of the Sterling Trust. I looked at the papers. "My dad funded NeuroCore? He bought the debt," Montgomery corrected. "He didn't buy equity, he bought liabilities. Your father owns the promissory notes on Julian's initial startup loans. He owns the equipment leases. He owns the operational debt." Caldwell stepped forward, pointing to a specific document. "And he owns the mortgage on the Greenwich estate. Julian refinanced 6 months ago to get liquid cash to prep for the IPO. He leveraged the house to the hilt. The bank sold that mortgage to the trust the very next day, per your father's standing instructions." The room spun. I owned the debt. I owned the loans. I was the bank. Julian had thrown me out of a house that essentially belonged to me. But what does it matter now? I asked, looking at Montgomery. "If he takes the company public, he'll pay off the debt. He'll be rich. He won't need the loans anymore." Montgomery smiled. It was a shark-like grin that told me exactly why he was the most feared lawyer in New York. "That's the beauty of it, Maya. Julian is cash poor. He spent everything on optics on the cars, the parties, this new girl, Sloane. He needs a bridge loan to float him until the IPO next month. He needs $10 million to cover legal fees and the marketing blitz. Without it, the IPO collapses. The company will fold under the weight of its own overhead." Caldwell pulled a freshly printed document off his printer. It was a loan application, dated this morning. "He submitted the application an hour ago," Caldwell said. "He is currently sitting in a private suite in our Hudson Yards branch, waiting for approval." He put up the house and the remaining company assets as collateral. He's desperate. If we deny him, he's finished. I looked at the application. I saw Julian's signature. Bold and arrogant. I remembered him laughing in the rain. I remembered him telling me I didn't fit the profile. He was begging for money from the very people he had trampled, and he didn't even know it. If you deny him, he sinks, Montgomery said. You can initiate foreclosure on the house today. You can seize the company assets for non-payment on the previous debts. You can destroy him right now. Maya, it is your call. The trust gives you absolute authority. I touched the cold metal card resting on the desk. Destroying him now would be easy. It would be satisfying. I could have security throw him out of the bank. I could change the locks on the mansion before noon, but it was too fast. It was too merciful. He wanted status. He wanted to be a VIP. He wanted to erase me. I didn't want him to just be broke. I wanted him to know exactly who broke him. I wanted him to build his tower so high that the sound of it falling would shatter his entire world. I looked at Montgomery and wiped the last tear from my face. The sadness was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity that felt like armor. No, I said. Caldwell looked confused. You don't want to approve the loan? I do want to approve it, I said, my voice steady. But not on his terms. I pulled the loan application toward me and picked up Caldwell's pen. He needs $10 million. Give it to him. Let him think he won. Let him think he's invincible. Let him spend it on his image and his mistress. But Alistair, I want you to rewrite the covenants. Montgomery leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with interest. What did you have in mind? I want a demand clause, I said. I want the right to call in the full amount of the loan, the new $10 million, plus all the historical debt my dad bought early and in full at any time, for any reason, with 24 hours notice. And I want an equity control trigger. If he defaults, the rights to the algorithms, the branding, and the voting shares immediately transfer to the creditor. Not the bank. The trust. Montgomery let out a low whistle. That is a hangman's noose, Maya. No businessman in his right mind would sign that. It's corporate suicide. He'll sign it, I said, because he is arrogant, because he thinks he's untouchable, and because he's desperate. He thinks it's just a formality before the IPO. He doesn't read the fine print. He proved that when he tricked me into signing the postnup. I looked at the photo of my father in the open wallet. Do not tell him it's me, I ordered. Keep the creditor blind. Use the shell company name something generic. Let him think it's just institutional financing. Caldwell looked at Montgomery. We can do that. Montgomery snapped his briefcase shut, stood up, and looked at me with a pride that made my chest ache. We can do whatever the client wishes, Harrison. And I believe the client has just decided to go hunting. Montgomery picked up the file. I will have the paperwork drafted immediately. We will present it to him in an hour. He will sign it. And when he does, you will own him body and soul. I stood up and smoothed down my muddy shirt, no longer feeling like a victim. I felt like the CEO of my own life. Do it, I said. Give him the money. Let him celebrate. Because when the check comes due, I want to be the one to hand it to him. The transformation began the moment I walked out of the bank. It wasn't just about buying new clothes or getting a haircut. It was about shedding the skin of the woman Julian had convinced me to be, the one who apologized for taking up space, the one who wore shapeless dresses to hide her curves because Eleanor said they were too much, the one who cooked and cleaned and cowered. She was gone. In her place was something sharper, harder, and infinitely more dangerous. I started with housing. Montgomery offered to help me find a modest place, but I didn't want modest. I wanted a vantage point. I wanted to see my enemy. Using a holding company Montgomery set up, I bought a penthouse directly across the street from Neurocore's headquarters in Hudson Yards. It was a glass box in the sky, modern and cold, with a direct line of sight into Julian's corner office. The first night I stood on the balcony, watching the tiny figure of my husband pacing back and forth, probably sweating over the loan application he had just submitted. It gave me an unexpected high. I was the ghost in the machine, the invisible hand guiding his fate, and he didn't even know I was watching. Next came the physical overhaul. I went to a salon in Soho, not the one Eleanor frequented, but a place known for ruthless architectural cuts. I told the stylist to chop it all off. No more buns. No more hiding. When she was finished, I looked in the mirror. I had a sleek, sharp bob that highlighted my cheekbones and my eyes. I looked predatory. I looked like money. Then, the wardrobe. I didn't go to the boutiques where Chloe bought clothes to flaunt them. I went to Bergdorf Goodman, to the private styling suites for clients who preferred quiet luxury. I bought structured blazers in deep emerald green silk navy trousers that flowed like water, and stilettos that clicked with authority on the pavement. Everything was tailored to the millimeter. No logos, no flash, just impeccable quality that whispered power instead of screaming it. When I walked down the street, people no longer ignored me. They moved out of my way. But the most important part of the transformation was the plan. I sat in my new living room, surrounded by monitors displaying stock tickers and real estate ledgers, plotting Julian's demolition. It would have been easy to sign the divorce papers and walk away with a settlement. Montgomery told me I could probably sue for a few dozen million if I fought. But a few million wasn't enough. Not after he erased me, not after he humiliated me. I didn't want his money. I wanted his legacy. I wanted him to lose the only thing he loved more than himself. His status. I decided to stall on the divorce. Let him think I was dragging my feet. Let him think I was broken and hiding. The longer we were married, the more leverage I had. And more importantly, I needed to still be his wife when the loan covenants kicked in. I needed to be standing right next to him when the house of cards collapsed so I could be the one to push the final wall down. For the next 3 days, I set the traps. I used the trust's resources to quietly buy up the debt of his supply chain vendors. I purchased the commercial garage where he kept his fleet of executive cars. I even bought the catering company he used for office lunches. Everywhere he turned, he was paying me. Every time he swiped a card, he was feeding the beast that would eventually consume him. Then, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Chloe. I looked at the screen, a smile curving the corners of my mouth. Maya, are you done crying in the gutter? We need you to clear out the storage closet. Julian wants to turn it into a wine cellar for the IPO party. Come get your trash, or I'm throwing it in a dumpster. If you clear it out fast, maybe I can talk Julian into letting you sign the papers without a lawyer present, so you don't embarrass yourself anymore. I laughed. A genuine, dark laugh. They still thought I was the old Maya. They thought I was desperate to sign, desperate to please. They had no idea I held the deed to the very house she was standing in. I texted back, my fingers flying over the screen. Sure, Chloe. I'll be there tomorrow at noon to clean it out. I hit send and stood up, walking over to the floor-to-ceiling window. I looked across the street at Julian's office. The lights were still on. He was working late, probably counting the money from the loan he had just secretly secured. I wasn't going back to clean. I was going back to survey my property and plant the final seeds of his destruction. I checked my reflection in the glass. The woman staring back was wearing a silk blouse that cost more than Chloe's engagement ring, with sharp hair and cold eyes. Get ready, Chloe, I whispered to the glass. You wanted a maid? Now you're getting a landlord. I turned away from the window and grabbed my handbag. It was time to go home. The wrought iron gates of the Greenwich estate swung open, but this time I didn't drive through them in a luxury SUV. I walked up the long, winding driveway wearing flat shoes and an unassuming beige trench coat, carrying a plastic bucket filled with cleaning supplies. It was a prop, of course, but a necessary one to get what I needed. I had to be exactly who they expected to see. The broken ex-wife. The desperate woman. The help I entered through the side door. The codes hadn't been changed yet. The house smelled of expensive lilies and arrogance. I could hear voices drifting from the formal living room, Chloe's shrill laughter, and the murmur of Eleanor's approval. I walked soundlessly down the hallway. My heart beat a steady, cold rhythm against my ribs. I had no fear. Fear had evaporated the moment I saw my bank balance. Now, I was just focused. I found them in the living room, surrounded by garment bags and tissue paper. It looked like a high-end boutique had exploded. Chloe was standing on a velvet ottoman in a glittering gold dress that was too low-cut and too tight. Eleanor was on her knees, pinning the hem, looking up at Chloe with an adoration she had never shown me. "Wow, look who finally decided to show up," Chloe said, catching my reflection in the floor-to-ceiling mirror. She didn't turn around, just watched me in the glass, a smug smirk playing on her lips. "I figured you'd drowned in a puddle by now." "I came for my things," I said, keeping my voice quiet and submissive. "You said if I cleared the closet, Julian would sign the papers." "That's the deal," Eleanor said, struggling to her feet, her knees popping loudly. "But since you're here, we have a minor emergency." Chloe stepped in an oil puddle in the garage. Her designer shoes are ruined. "Since you're dressed for manual labor anyway, be a dear and scrub them for her." She pointed to a pair of stilettos discarded on the white rug. A dark, greasy stain marred the pristine leather of the left shoe. A week ago, this humiliation would have made me cry. Now, I saw an opportunity. "Of course," I said, picking up the shoes. "I'll need to take them to the laundry room to use the right solvent." "Just don't ruin them, Maya," Chloe snapped. "Those Manolos cost more than your life is worth right now." I nodded and backed out of the room. The moment I was out of sight, I moved fast. I didn't go to the laundry room. I headed straight for the guest wing where Chloe had set up camp. Her bedroom door was open, clothes strewn everywhere. I pulled a tiny, high-powered listening device from my pocket, supplied by Montgomery's security team. I stuck it under the heavy oak nightstand in the corner, where the maids never dusted. It was invisible. Next, I moved silently down the hall to Julian's home office. The door was closed, but unlocked. He was arrogant enough to believe he was untouchable in his own home. I slipped inside. The room smelled like his Tom Ford cologne and old scotch. I walked over to the massive mahogany desk and stuck a second microphone right under the lip of the desk, exactly where he sat when taking calls. I was about to leave when I heard the front door open. Heavy footsteps echoed on the marble. Julian was home. I froze. I couldn't make it back to the laundry room without running into him. I had to improvise. I pulled a microfiber cloth out of my bucket and started furiously polishing a bookshelf, hunching my shoulders to make myself look small. Julian walked in, loosening his tie. He looked flushed, manic, riding the adrenaline high of the $10 million loan he had just secretly secured. He stopped short when he saw me. A cruel smile spread across his face. "Well, well," he said, walking to his desk and pouring himself a drink. "Who's this? The ghost of Christmas past? I didn't think you'd have the guts to show your face here again." "I'm just cleaning, Julian," I said, keeping my eyes on the floor. "I just want my boxes." He laughed, taking a sip of scotch. "Look at you. Polishing my shelves. It suits you, Maya. It really does. You know, I was just telling Sloan an hour ago some people are born to lead, and others are born to serve. You always had a servant's soul. It's pathetic, honestly. That slave mentality just can't be washed out. Even when you're free, you come back to the master's house to clean." The insult was vile, calculated to strip me of my humanity. He wanted me to break. He wanted me to scream so he could call me crazy. Instead, I gripped the cloth tighter and polished a spot on the wood until it shined. "You're right, Julian," I whispered. "I just want to be useful." "Good girl," he sneered. "Now get out of my office. I have important calls to make. Big business. Things you wouldn't understand." He sat down at his desk, directly over the microphone I had just planted. He waved his hand at me like he was swatting a fly. I scurried out, heading straight for the utility closet under the stairs where the wall safe was hidden. It was tucked behind a panel of breaker switches. Julian rarely used it. He preferred keeping his money in his pocket and his secrets on his phone. But I knew that's where he kept the physical ledgers, the off-the-books accounts, the records of every bribe, every kickback, every dollar he siphoned out of the company to inflate the IPO numbers. He kept them there because he thought I was too stupid to understand them, and he was too paranoid to keep them at the office. I knelt in the dark closet. I looked at the keypad. He hadn't changed the code. He was too lazy. It was the incorporation date of NeuroCore. I punched in the numbers. The light flashed green. The lock clicked. My heart pounded against my ribs. I pulled the heavy door open. Inside, stacked neatly next to bundles of cash, were 3 black leather-bound notebooks. The shadow ledgers, he used to joke. When we started, the fraud was petty. Now, it was a federal indictment waiting to happen. I took the notebooks and shoved them into the bottom of my cleaning bucket, covering them with dirty rags and bottles of bleach. I shut the safe and backed out, just as Chloe yelled from the living room. "Maya! Where are my shoes? I have a fitting in 10 minutes. I grabbed the bucket and jogged to the laundry room, splashing a little water on the shoes to make it look like I had at least tried. I walked back into the living room, head down, holding the shoes out like an offering. "Here," I said. I did the best I could. Chloe snatched them from me. "You left a smudge?" she said, inspecting them closely. "Useless. Absolutely useless. Just get your trash and get out. I'm tired of looking at your sad face." Eleanor didn't even look up from her sewing. "Make sure you lock the service door behind you, Maya. We don't want riffraff wandering in." I walked toward the back door, the heavy bucket digging into my palm. The weight of the ledgers hidden inside was the most comforting feeling I had ever experienced. "I'm leaving," I said, putting my hand on the doorknob. "Don't let the door hit you on the way out," Julian yelled from his office. I stepped out into the crisp evening air. I walked down the driveway, past the manicured hedges and the fountain. I didn't look back. I didn't cry. I reached my car, a sleek, unassuming Audi sedan Montgomery had procured for me, and set the bucket on the passenger seat. I got behind the wheel and looked at the house one last time. They were in there, trying on dresses and drinking scotch, celebrating a victory that was already hollow. They thought I was a maid. They thought I was a victim. I patted the notebooks next to me. I wasn't a maid. I was the executioner. And I had just sharpened the blade. I started the engine and drove away. The first recording from the microphone in Julian's office was already beaming to my phone. "Hey, Sloan." Julian's voice crackled through the speaker, clear as day. "Baby." The loan cleared. 10 million. We're going to be filthy rich. And the best part? My idiot ex-wife was literally polishing my desk while I signed the papers. She has no idea. I smiled at the road. "Oh, Julian, you have no idea." The silence in my penthouse was heavy, broken only by the hum of the server rack Montgomery had installed in my living room and the crackle of static in my noise-canceling headphones. I sat in the dark, bathed in the blue light of 3 monitors, watching the audio waveforms peak and dip. Across the street, the windows of the NeuroCore building glowed a monument to my husband's ego, but the real story was playing out in my ears, broadcast straight from the device I had hidden under the nightstand in the Greenwich guest wing. I expected to hear Chloe complaining to her friends. I expected to hear her mocking my clothes or planning how to spend Julian's money on another pair of shoes. But what I heard instead made my blood run cold and then boil with a new, focused intensity. The audio feed from the guest bedroom was sharp. I heard the rustle of silk sheets and the clink of glasses. Then a man's voice. It wasn't Julian. It wasn't her husband, my brother-in-law Michael. It was a voice I recognized from industry galas. The voice belonged to Julian's fiercest competitor, Preston Hayes, CEO of Quantum Tech. "Do you have the files?" Preston asked, his voice low and urgent. I heard the sound of a zipper. Then the heavy thud of a hard drive being set on a wooden surface. "Everything is right there," Chloe replied. The usual shrillness was gone from her tone. She sounded calm, calculating. The source code for the new compression algorithm, the beta user data, and the entire investor prospectus for the IPO launch. All on that drive. I sat up straight, pressing the headphones tighter to my ears. She wasn't just cheating on Michael. She was committing corporate espionage. She was selling Neurocore, my company, the company I built to a rival. "Is it encrypted?" Preston asked. "Oh, please," Chloe scoffed. "Julian uses his birthday for everything. I guessed his admin password on the second try. He's so busy playing the big shot CEO, he doesn't even notice when I log into the central mainframe from the guest Wi-Fi." I watched the audio waves spike as Preston laughed. "He is going to be decimated when we launch this feature next week. Quantum is going to crush his valuation before he even rings the opening bell." "That's the plan, isn't it?" Chloe purred. "But we have to time it perfectly." "You can't leak the tech right now." "Why not?" Preston asked. "Because I want to bleed him dry first. He hasn't got the cash yet," Chloe said. And there it was, the kill shot. The phrase that sealed her fate. "Julian, that idiot, thinks he's a genius. He thinks he sweet-talked some anonymous lender into floating him $10 million. He's walking around the house like the king of New York. He has no idea he signed his own death warrant." I leaned forward, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Wait until the wire transfer hits the Neurocore operating account," Chloe continued, her voice dripping with venomous greed. "Once that 10 million lands, I have access to the accounts through a shell LLC I set up as an event management vendor. I'm going to invoice him for $6 million for consulting fees and venue deposits. He'll sign off on it without reading it because he's too busy looking in the mirror. As soon as the money is offshore in my account, I'll give you the rest of the code, and we can watch the whole thing burn together." She laughed, a sound that was pure ice. "I am going to gut him, Preston. I'm going to leave him with nothing but that cheap little mistress and a mountain of debt. And then you and I are flying to Street Barts." I pulled the headphones off and set them on the desk. My hands were shaking slightly, not from fear, but from the sheer scale of the betrayal. Chloe wasn't just a snob. She was a predator. She had played a long con, infiltrating the family, feeding on their insecurities, and planning all along to tear down the legacy that was funded by my father's money. And Julian, my husband, the man who told me I lacked vision, he was so blinded by his own arrogance, so obsessed with his image and his new girlfriend, that he didn't see the snake coiled in his own guest bedroom. He was letting her steal the very lifeline I had just thrown him. For a fleeting second, an instinct flared. The instinct to save him. I could call him right now. I could play the recording. I could warn him that his sister-in-law was sleeping with the enemy and plotting to drain the loan he had just secured. If I warned him, he could stop her. He could save the company. He might even thank me. I looked at the monitor showing the live feed from the microphone in Julian's office. He was sitting at his desk, a glass of scotch in hand. Sloane was perched on the edge of the desk, her legs crossed, laughing at something he was saying. I put the headphones back on and switched the channel to the feed from his office. "Can you believe she was actually scrubbing the shelves?" Julian was saying, his words slightly slurred. "On her hands and knees." Sloane. Just scrubbing. It was pathetic. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. But then I remembered she's just dead weight. Now that we have this 10 million, we can really start living. I'm going to buy you that diamond tennis bracelet we saw at Cartier. "You're so sweet, baby," Sloane cooed. "But are you sure about the loan terms?" I saw the paperwork. That immediate repayment clause looked scary. Julian laughed, a sound of pure hubris. "It's just legal mumbo-jumbo, babe. Standard corporate finance boilerplate. The lender is a shell outfit called Apex Investments. Probably some old guys on a board who just want to collect their interest. They don't know who they're dealing with. I'll turn that 10 million into $1 billion in 6 months. They won't call the loan. They'll be begging to invest more. I took the headphones off again. He was laughing at me. He was laughing at the old guys who were actually the ghost of his working-class father-in-law. He was planning to spend my father's money on diamonds for his mistress, while Chloe planned to steal the rest to run away with his rival. The choice crystallized in my mind. It was cold and hard as a diamond. I wasn't going to save him. Saving him required my intervention. It meant showing my hand too early. It meant fighting his battles for him, just like I had done for 10 years. If I saved him from Chloe, he would just go back to being the same arrogant, ungrateful man he always was. He would think he survived because he was smart, not because I was merciful. No, he had to fall, and he had to hit rock bottom. I picked up my phone and dialed Montgomery. It was late, but I knew he would answer. Yes? His deep voice rumbled over the line. Is everything in place? Everything is perfect, Maya, he said. Do you want to proceed? Even after what you found in the safe? Especially after what I found, I said, staring at the waveform of Chloe's voice on my screen. Send the 10 million. Make sure it hits his operating account before noon tomorrow. Understood. And Alistair? Yes? I need you to contact the FBI's white-collar crime division. I have a tip for them regarding corporate espionage and wire fraud. But tell them to wait. Wait for what? Until the money moves? I said. I want her caught red-handed. I want the transaction to clear. I want the invoice paid. I want the paper trail to be absolute. I see, Montgomery said, his tone shifting into that of a conspiratorial lawyer. You are using the loan as bait. Exactly, I said. Let Chloe think she won. Let her wire the funds. Let her hand over the hard drive to Preston. Because when she does, she isn't just stealing from Julian. She is stealing from the sovereign trust. And that makes it a federal crime with mandatory prison time. And Julian? Montgomery asked. What happens to him when the money is gone? I looked at the screen one last time. Julian was kissing Sloane, completely oblivious to the blade hovering over his back. When the money is gone, I said, I trigger the demand clause. He defaults. He'll have no cash, no rights to his algorithms, and no friends. He will come crawling to me, not because he loves me, but because I'll be the only person who holds the deeds to his entire life. Very well, Montgomery said. The wire goes out at 9 a.m. I hung up. I looked at the audio files on my screen, the proof of Chloe's treason and Julian's stupidity. I saved them to 3 different secure servers. I was no longer the help. I was no longer the wife. I was the architect of their ruin. Sleep tight, Chloe, I whispered to the empty room. Enjoy your victory lap. Because tomorrow, the trap snaps shut. 3 days later, I sat in my apartment with a steaming cup of Earl Grey in my hand, watching the live feed from the hidden camera in Julian's office. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion, except I was the one controlling the traffic lights. Across the street, inside the glass tower that my father's trust owned, Julian was pacing back and forth. His suit jacket was off, his sleeves rolled up, and the confident stride of the CEO was gone. It had been replaced by the frantic, jerky movements of a trapped animal. The trap had sprung exactly as I engineered it 24 hours ago. The $10 million wire transfer had hit the NeuroCore operating account. 12 hours later, just as Montgomery and I predicted, Chloe's shell company, Apex Consulting, submitted an invoice for $6 million for emergency event consulting. Julian, too busy getting fitted for a new Rolex, had digitally signed the wire authorization without reading the itemized details. And then the hammer fell. On the screen, I watched Julian's CFO, a nervous man named Derek, who had always been too timid to stand up to his boss, enter the office. He looked like he was walking to the gallows. Julian, Derek said, his voice trembling even through the audio feed. We have a problem, a big one. Julian didn't stop pacing. What now, Derek? Did the caterers cancel the champagne tower? Just throw money at them. We have liquidity. We're rich. We don't have liquidity, Derek stammered. I just tried to run payroll for the engineering team. The transaction was declined. Julian stopped. He turned slowly, a look of genuine confusion on his face. What do you mean? Declined? We have 10 million in the account. I saw the wire confirmation myself. It was there, Derek said, sweating profusely. But 6 million went out this morning to a vendor called Apex Consulting. And the remaining balance is frozen. Frozen? Julian roared, slamming his fist on the desk. Who froze it? The lender, Derek whispered. Apex Investments. They issued a freeze order 45 minutes ago. They cited suspicious financial activity, a breach of covenant. They locked the operating account, the reserve account, and the credit line. Julian, we have zero access to cash. I took a sip of my tea, enjoying the warmth. Montgomery had filed the freeze notice the exact second the money hit Chloe's offshore account. Per the terms of the new loan, the very terms Julian hadn't bothered to read, any unauthorized transfer over $5 million triggered an automatic freeze and immediate audit. Fix it, Julian screamed, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. Call them. Tell them it's a mistake. Tell them I am Julian Cross. I tried, Derek said, shrinking back. Their legal department said the account is under forensic review. They said if we want to challenge it, we have to file an injunction in court. That could take weeks. Julian, payroll is due tomorrow. If we don't pay, the engineers walk. The IPO is in 2 weeks. If the staff walks, the valuation drops to zero. Get out! Julian yelled, picking up a heavy glass paperweight and hurling it at the wall. Get out and fix this. Derek fled the office. Julian stood there, breathing heavily, staring at the dent in the drywall. He ran his hands down his face, pulling the skin tight, suddenly looking aged and exhausted. Then the phone on his desk rang. He ignored it. It rang again. He snatched the receiver up. What? He barked. I watched his face go slack. It was the building management. My management team, Mr. Cross. The voice on the speakerphone said, cold and professional. We are calling regarding your lease. The rent for this month, plus the arrears for the last 3 months, was due today at noon. The auto draft was returned for insufficient funds. I'll cut you a check, Julian snapped. Just give me 1 day. I'm afraid we can't do that, the property manager said. Per your lease agreement, failure to pay on the deadline constitutes a default. We have initiated eviction proceedings. You have 48 hours to vacate the premises, or we will contact the marshals to padlock the doors. Julian slammed the phone down so hard I thought it would shatter. He slumped into his leather chair, the chair he thought made him a king. He was boxed in from all sides. No cash, no staff, no office, and somewhere in the back of his mind, he had to be wondering where that $6 million went. But his ego wouldn't let him see the thief sleeping in his own guest room. He pulled out his cell phone. I watched him scroll through his contacts. He called Chloe. I switched the audio feed to listen. Chloe, where are you? He demanded. I need you to wire back some of the event money. The bank made a mistake. I can't right now, Julian. Chloe's voice floated through, sounding breezy and detached. I'm at the wellness spa. The reception is terrible. Just deal with it. You're the genius, remember? She hung up. I smiled. She was already cutting ties. He dialed another number. Sloan, baby, I need a favor, he said, his voice cracking into a desperate plea. Can you front me some cash? Just for 48 hours. The bank is having a technical issue. There was a pause. Then Sloane's voice, cold and sharp. You want to borrow money, Julian? You told me you were worth millions. My wealth manager said Neurocore was a gold mine. You're broke. It's just a technical issue, he yelled. Call me when the issue is fixed, she said. I don't date distressed assets. Click. He was alone. Absolutely. Entirely alone. He buried his head in his hands. I could see his shoulders shaking. He was either crying or laughing at the absurdity of it all. Then, he sat up. A look of frantic determination hardened his features. He opened his desk drawer and pulled out a manila folder. I zoomed the camera in. It was the draft of the divorce settlement he had tried to force me to sign. He picked up his phone again and dialed a number I knew by heart. My phone vibrated on the table. I let it ring 3 times before I answered. "Yes," I said, keeping my voice calm and neutral. "Maya, where are you?" Julian demanded. He didn't sound like a husband. He sounded like a drowning man who would climb over his own mother just to take a breath. "I'm busy, Julian." "What do you want?" "I need you to sign the papers," he said. "Today. Right now. I told you I was reviewing them with my lawyer." "We don't have time for lawyers," he shouted. "Listen, Maya, I'm trying to be generous. I will give you the $50,000 in cash, but you have to sign today, and I need you to sign the waiver for the jewelry." "The jewelry?" I asked, my blood running cold. "Your mother's jewelry," he said impatiently. "The vintage pearls. The sapphire brooch. The stuff you left in the safe. It's marital property. I had it appraised. It's worth a few $100,000. I'm willing to let you have the cash equivalent, but I need to liquidate the pieces immediately to cover some closing costs on the house. He was going to sell my mother's jewelry, the only things I had left of her. He was going to pawn my heritage to pay for his mistakes." "You want to sell my mom's brooch?" I asked, my voice dropping to a whisper. "They are just things, Maya," he yelled. "Why are you so sentimental? I need an influx of cash. Stop being selfish for once in your life and help me out." "Selfish?" The word hung in the air. He threw me out in the rain. He stole my company. He cheated on me. And I was selfish. "Fine, Julian," I said. "I'll sign." "Really?" The relief in his voice was pathetic. "Good. Good girl. Come to the office." "No," I said. "I am not coming to that office. I don't want to see you there." "Then where?" "Just name the place." "Tonight," I said. "At the charity gala." "The gala?" Julian asked. Confused. "Why there?" "Because we need to keep up appearances, don't we?" I said smoothly. "If we're getting divorced, let's do it with some dignity. Meet me at the gala. Bring the papers, and bring the jewelry. If you give me the jewelry, I'll sign away the house and the company." "You just want the jewelry?" He sounded suspicious. "That's all I want, Julian. You can keep the rest. Just bring my mother's things to the gala. We can sign in the lobby." "Fine," he snapped. "Fine, I'll bring it. But you better not pull any stunts. I don't have time for your drama, Maya. The reception starts at 7. Be there." "I will," I promised. I hung up. I looked across the street one last time. Julian was frantically shoving papers into a briefcase, looking manic. He thought he had found a lifeline. He thought he was going to sell my past to buy his future. He had no idea that the charity gala at the Plaza Hotel wasn't just a party. It was the premier event of the New York social season. The mayor would be there, senators, titans of industry, the very people he needed to impress to save his business. And I wasn't going there as his wife. I wasn't going there as his victim. I was going there as the woman who owned the building he was sitting in. I picked up the phone and dialed Montgomery. "Alistair," I said. "It's time for Phase 3. Assemble the team and make sure the FBI agents are on standby at the gala." "The FBI?" Montgomery asked. "Why?" "Because," I said, watching Julian run out of his office. "Tonight, someone is going to try to sell stolen property. And I want to make sure everyone sees it." The grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel was a galaxy of crystal chandeliers, silk drapery, and New York's elite. It was a charity auction, a night where the powerful came to outbid each other for social clout. The air smelled of expensive perfume and old money. Waiters glided silently through the crowd, offering flutes of champagne that cost more than my old monthly grocery budget. Julian and Chloe stood near the entrance, trying desperately to look like they belonged. Julian wore a tuxedo that was a little too shiny, his smile a little too wide as he scanned the room for anyone important enough to corner. Chloe was poured into a silver gown that was clearly a high-end rental. Her arm was possessively looped through his. She was scanning the room too, but not for business contacts. She was looking for validation. She wanted to be seen. She wanted to be envied. "Look at them," Chloe whispered loudly, gesturing with her champagne glass toward a cluster of actual billionaires near the bar. "They have no idea what's coming. Once we get through tonight, we're going to run this town." Julian nervously adjusted his cufflinks, patting his breast pocket where the divorce papers rested. "We just need Maya to sign. Once she signs, the assets are clear. We unlock the credit line, launch the IPO, and then we're untouchable." "She'll sign," Chloe said, rolling her eyes. "She's desperate. Probably walked here from the subway. Let's just get it over with so we can enjoy the evening. I want to meet the mayor." I watched them from the shadows of the VIP entrance, a small, secret smile playing on my lips. They looked like children playing dress-up in a world they didn't understand. I stepped into the light. I wasn't wearing a maid's uniform tonight. I was wearing a custom-tailored, midnight blue velvet gown that hugged every curve and pooled around my feet like liquid shadow. My hair was styled in sleek, severe waves. Around my neck hung a massive, flawless sapphire pendant, a piece from my mother's collection that Julian didn't even know existed because I never trusted him enough to show it to him. I walked toward them. My heels struck a steady rhythm on the marble floor. Heads turned as I passed. Conversation stopped. The air in the room seemed to shift, pulled by the new gravity I had created. Chloe saw me first. Her eyes widened, not in recognition, but in shock. She elbowed Julian so hard he spilled his drink. Julian looked up and froze. For a second, his brain couldn't compute who I was. He saw a wealthy, powerful woman walking toward him, and his first instinct was to charm her. Then, reality caught up. His jaw dropped. "Maya," he choked out. "Well, look at you," Chloe sneered, recovering quickly. "Robbed a costume department, did we? Or did you spend your severance check on a rental? You look ridiculous." I stopped in front of them. I didn't say a word. I just looked at them. I let my gaze sweep over Julian's sweaty forehead, over Chloe's rented dress. The fear was lurking just beneath their arrogance. "What are you doing here?" Julian hissed, looking around nervously to see if anyone was watching. "This is a private event, Maya. Tickets are $10,000 a plate. You can't afford to breathe the air in here." "I am here to sign, Julian," I said, my voice cool and even. "Remember? You invited me. I said meet me in the lobby, not crash the ballroom," Julian snapped. "Chloe, get security. Get this trash out of here before she embarrasses us in front of the mayor." Chloe raised her hand, snapping her fingers at a passing security guard. "Hey, you. We have a trespasser." This woman snuck in. "Have her removed immediately." The guard, a large man with an earpiece, stepped closer. He looked at Chloe, then at Julian, and then at me. His face softened into an expression of deep respect. "Good evening, Miss Sterling," he said, bowing his head slightly. "It is an honor to have you tonight. The board is waiting for you at the head table." Chloe's mouth fell open. "What? Do you know who she is?" "She's nobody. She's his ex-wife. She used to scrub floors." The guard ignored her. He spoke into his wrist mic. "Eagle 1 to base. The chairwoman has arrived," escorting her to the front. "Chairwoman?" Julian squeaked. Before they could process what was happening, the crowd parted. A group of distinguished men and women, the gala committee, city council members, the people Julian had been dying to meet all night, walked toward us. They were led by none other than Harrison Caldwell, looking sharp in a tuxedo. "Miss Sterling," Caldwell said, extending his hand. We were getting worried you wouldn't make it. The auction can't start without you. I took his hand. Thank you, Harrison. I wouldn't have missed this for the world. Julian grabbed my arm. What is going on, Maya? Who are these people? Why are they talking to you? Caldwell looked at Julian's hand on my arm. His expression turned to ice. Remove your hand from the chairwoman, Mr. Cross, Caldwell said quietly. Or I will have you thrown out of this building. Julian snatched his hand back as if he had been burned. Chairwoman? Chairwoman of what? Of the Sterling Sovereign Trust, Caldwell said. The primary sponsor of tonight's event, and the owner of the property we are standing in. Julian stared at me, his eyes wide and glassy with confusion. Sterling? Your dad? The barber? My father had many talents, Julian, I said, smoothing my gown. And one of them was investing. He spent 30 years buying New York. You own the plaza? Chloe whispered, the color draining from her face. I own the dirt, I corrected. The trust owns the lease. And tonight, I am the guest of honor. I turned to Caldwell. Shall we? Please, Caldwell said, offering his arm. I walked away from them, leaving them standing in the middle of the room, small and insignificant. As we made our way to the head table, which sat on a raised dais overlooking the entire ballroom, I heard Chloe's voice, shrill and desperate, trying to rationalize what just happened. Don't worry, Julian. It's a scam. She probably slept with that old guy Caldwell. That's how she got in. She's just a gold digger who got lucky. We still have the loan. We still have the business. She's nobody. I sat down at the head table, right next to the mayor. I picked up my heavy linen napkin and placed it in my lap. I looked out over the sea of faces. I saw Julian and Chloe arguing in the corner, their panic rising. They were right about one thing. I was nothing like the woman they thought they knew. I signaled a waiter. Champagne, please, I said, and send a bottle to Mr. Cross and his guest. They are going to need a drink for what happens next. Then, the lights dimmed. The auctioneer stepped up to the podium. A spotlight hit the stage. It was time for the main event, and Julian was about to learn that the price of admission was everything he had left. The auctioneer's voice boomed through the hall, a rhythmic chant of numbers and greed that seemed to hypnotize the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, we come to the climax of the evening. Lot number 42. A rare 1,955 solid gold vintage Patek Philippe timepiece. This exquisite chronometer was generously donated by Mr. Julian Cross. It is a family heirloom, passed down through 4 generations of the Cross family. I watched from the head table as a hush fell over the crowd. The spotlight illuminated a glass display case on the stage, highlighting the watch. My breath hitched. It was not a Cross family heirloom. Julian's grandfather drove a bus in Ohio. That watch belonged to Arthur Sterling. It was the watch my mother had saved for 5 years to buy him for their 10th wedding anniversary. I hadn't seen it since the day my father died. I thought it had been lost in the chaos of the funeral, or perhaps buried with him. But no. Julian had stolen it. He had picked a dead man's pockets and hoarded it like a dragon, waiting for a moment he needed fast cash. And now, he was selling my father's heart to pay his debts. I looked at Julian. He was beaming, swirling his champagne glass, playing the role of the benevolent philanthropist. He leaned into Chloe, whispering something that made her laugh. They looked so confident. They thought they had committed the perfect crime. They had no idea I was sitting 50 feet away. And I knew the serial number of that watch by heart. Opening bid is set at $50,000, the auctioneer announced. Do I hear 50? 50? A man shouted from the back. 60! Another voice countered. I waited. I let the sharks circle. The price steadily climbed to $200,000. Julian was trying to look bored, but I could see the sweat glistening on his upper lip. He needed this money. Every dollar was a lifeline for his sinking company. $500,000, I said, raising my paddle. My voice was calm, slicing through the murmurs of the room. The auctioneer paused, looking at me with deference. The chairwoman bids $500,000. Do I hear 6? Julian's head whipped toward me. His eyes narrowed. I could see the gears turning in his head. He realized 2 things simultaneously. First, that I wanted the watch, and second, that he could use my sentimentality to bleed me dry. He nudged Chloe. She pulled out her phone and typed a message. Suddenly, a paddle went up on the other side of the room. It was held by a man I recognized as one of Preston Hayes' partners, a shill bidder. 600,000! The shill yelled. 700, I replied without hesitation. 800? The shill shot back. Julian was smiling now. He was practically vibrating with joy. He thought he had me trapped. He thought he was driving up the price, forcing his stupid ex-wife to pay a fortune for a trinket, funneling millions straight into his pocket. He thought he was manipulating me. $1 million, I said. The room gasped. $1 million for a watch. It was unheard of. 1.2, the shill said, clearly receiving instructions from Chloe. I looked at Julian. He winked at me, a slow, arrogant wink that said, I won. He thought I was acting on emotion. He thought I was desperate to buy back a piece of my past. He didn't know I was buying evidence. $2 million, I said. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the auctioneer seemed stunned. $2 million, he stammered. Going once. Twice. Sold to Miss Maya Sterling for $2 million. The gavel slammed down. The room erupted into applause. Julian jumped up, clapping the loudest. He walked toward the stage, arms wide open, ready to accept the check, ready to shake hands, ready to bask in the glory of his windfall. He looked at me with a triumphant smirk. Thank you for your generosity, Maya, he said, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. It warms my heart to see my family's history go to someone who appreciates it. My team will send wire instructions. I stood up. I didn't reach for my purse. I didn't reach for a checkbook. I walked past him, ignoring his outstretched hand, and climbed the steps to the stage. I took the microphone from the stunned auctioneer. Thank you, Julian, I said, my voice amplified over the speakers, echoing into every corner of the ballroom. But there seems to be a misunderstanding. I have no intention of wiring you a single dime. The applause died instantly. The room went cold. Julian let out a nervous, sharp laugh. Maya, don't be ridiculous. You won the auction. You have to pay. That's how this works. I turned to the audience. I looked at the mayor, at the investors, at the elite of New York. I am not going to pay, I said clearly, because you cannot buy what already belongs to you, and you certainly don't pay a thief for the return of stolen property. A collective gasp swept through the room. Julian's face turned the color of ash. That is a lie, he yelled, losing his composure. That is my grandfather's watch. She's just angry at me. Security, get her off the stage. I reached into my clutch and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It wasn't a check. It was a notarized affidavit from a jeweler dated 1990, stapled to an NYPD police report filed 4 years ago when the watch disappeared from my father's estate. This is the certificate of authenticity, I read, holding it high. Serial number 84920. The back casing is engraved. To Arthur. My love forever. Maria. I turned to the appraiser standing by the podium. Open the case, please. Read the inscription. The appraiser looked at Julian, then at me. With trembling hands, he unlocked the glass case, picked up the watch, and turned it over. He squinted at the gold. It says, To Arthur. My love forever. Maria. The appraiser read into the microphone. The ballroom exploded into whispers. Julian looked like he was going to be sick. He searched the room for Chloe, but she was already gliding toward the exit, trying to distance herself from the blast radius. This item was stolen from the estate of Arthur Sterling 4 years ago, I announced. The man standing before you, Julian Cross, appropriated it, hid it, and tonight, attempted to fence stolen property at a charity event. This isn't philanthropy. It is a felony. I looked to the back of the room. Alistair Montgomery raised his hand. It was the signal. The double doors burst open. 4 agents from the FBI's white-collar division walked in, flanked by 2 NYPD officers in uniform. They were grim-faced, marching straight down the center aisle. The crowd parted for them like the Red Sea. "Mr. Cross," the lead agent said, stepping onto the stage, "we need to confiscate that item as evidence, and we have a few questions for you about its origins, along with several other discrepancies in your corporate filings." Julian backed away, holding his hands up. "This is a mistake. She's lying. She planted this." "I'm a CEO! You can't do this to me in front of these people." I walked down the steps and stood next to him. I leaned in close, so only he could hear. "I told you, Julian," I whispered. "You wanted a status image? Now you have one." The police bagged the watch in an evidence pouch. They didn't cuff him yet, that would be too kind for this moment. But they escorted him off the stage, guiding him firmly toward a private holding room for questioning. The humiliation was absolute. The mayor turned his back on him. The investors he had courted all night were already on their phones, calling their lawyers to pull their funding. I watched him walk away, a small, broken man. I looked at the empty space where the watch had been. The watch hadn't been returned to me yet, but I had something better. I had the truth. I walked back to my table. Harrison Caldwell poured me fresh champagne. "To justice," he said quietly. "To Arthur," I replied. I took a sip. It tasted like victory. But the night wasn't over. Julian was ruined socially. But he still had a company. He still had a house. And tomorrow morning, I was going to collect. The board meeting was scheduled. The shareholders were waiting. And the chairwoman had one last piece of business to attend to. The morning sun sliced through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the NeuroCore boardroom, highlighting the dust motes dancing in the air, but it couldn't warm the freezing atmosphere inside. The board of directors sat around the long mahogany table, their faces pale and drawn. At the head of the table sat Julian. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in a week. His tie was loose, his eyes bloodshot, and the manic energy that usually propelled him had curdled into sheer panic. The company was bleeding out. The accounts were frozen. The staff was threatening to strike. And the IPO that was supposed to make him a king was now an anchor dragging him to the bottom of the ocean. He checked his watch for the 10th time in a minute. "Where are they?" he snapped at Derek, his CFO. "You said the lead creditor from Apex Investments was coming at 9. If we don't get that freeze lifted by noon, the servers go dark. We're dead, Derek." "Dead." Derek wiped sweat from his brow. "They're here, Julian. Security just badged them up. They're in the elevator." Julian straightened his jacket, running a hand through his hair, trying to summon the ghost of his former charisma. Okay. Everyone gather yourselves. This is our last shot. We have to sell them on the vision. Forget the financials. Sell the dream." The double doors of the boardroom clicked open. Julian pasted on his best smile, stepping forward with his hand outstretched, ready to charm whoever walked through that door. "Welcome to NeuroCore," Julian started, his voice booming. "I'm so glad you could make—" The words died in his throat. His arm dropped. He stared at the doorway, opening and closing his mouth like a suffocating fish. I didn't walk in alone. I was flanked by Alistair Montgomery, whose mere presence was enough to silence a courtroom, and 2 uniformed NYPD officers. I was wearing a stark white power suit, immaculate and tailored, a jarring contrast to the catering uniform Julian had last seen me wearing in an office. I didn't look at the board members. I looked dead at my husband. "Maya," Julian whispered, blinking as if he were hallucinating. What are you doing here? This is a closed meeting, he sneered, finding a sliver of his old arrogance. Did you come crawling back to beg for a job? I walked past him, ignoring the question, and pulled out the chair at the opposite end of the table. The chairman's seat. I sat down, placed a leather folio on the table, and steepled my fingers. I'm not here for a job, Julian, I said, my voice calm, carrying to the far corners of the room, and I certainly didn't come to beg. Then get out, he yelled, his fear metastasizing into aggression. Derek, call security. Have her thrown out. She's trespassing. Derek didn't move. He was staring at Montgomery, who had just dropped a stack of legal documents onto the table with a heavy thud. Mr. Cross. Montgomery boomed, his deep, authoritative voice taking command of the room. I suggest you take a seat. You are no longer in a position to be giving orders. Julian looked at the police officers, then at Montgomery, and finally back at me. The dawning horror in his eyes was absolute. What is this? He asked, his voice shaking. Who is the investor? Read the documents, Julian, I said. He grabbed the top file, his hands trembling. It was the loan agreement he had signed 3 days ago, the one with the trap covenant he hadn't bothered to read. He stared at the signature line for the creditor. Apex Investments. You? Julian laughed, a high, hysterical sound. You are Apex? Maya, you're broke. I froze your accounts. You slept in your car. Stop playing games. I am not playing games, I said, leaning forward. Apex Investments is a subsidiary of the Sterling Sovereign Trust, my father's trust. And I own your debt, Julian. I own the $10 million bridge loan. I own the mortgage on the Greenwich estate. I own the ground lease for this building. I stood up, resting my hands on the table. And since you breached the covenants of the loan by attempting to illegally wire $6 million to an offshore shell company yesterday, I have exercised my right to call the debt. I converted it into equity. You didn't read the fine print, did you, sweetheart? I asked, my voice dripping with ice. In the event of default, the creditor immediately assumes control of a majority stake in the company. The voting rights, the IP, the algorithms, the assets, everything. I swept my gaze over the stunned board of directors. Gentlemen, I announced, as the new majority shareholder and primary creditor, I am calling this meeting to order. My first order of business is the immediate termination of the CEO, for cause. Julian collapsed backward into his chair. His legs gave out. No, he whispered. That's impossible. You were a maid. You made soup. You don't have this kind of money. I have more money than you ever dreamed of, Julian, I said coldly. And unlike you, I got it by being smart, not by stepping on the necks of the people who loved me. You can't do this, he mumbled, looking around the room for an ally. Call Chloe. Call Chloe. She has money. Her family will bail us out. We'll fight this. I smiled. It was the smile of a wolf cornering its prey. Oh, please, call Chloe, I said. In fact, I insist. Bring her in. Let's see if she can save you. Julian scrambled for his phone. His fingers shook so badly he dropped it twice. He put it on speaker. Chloe! He yelled. Get down here. Maya is here. She says she owns the debt. She's trying to take the company. We need to buy her out. You need to call your father. We need capital now. 10 minutes later, the boardroom doors flew open. Chloe stormed in, wearing designer athleisure wear. She looked flushed and irritated, clearly pulled away from a Pilates class. She didn't see the police officers standing in the shadows. She only saw a sweating, pale Julian and me sitting at the head of the table. What is going on? She demanded, hands on her hips. Why are you calling me in the middle of my workout? And why is she sitting in your chair? Chloe, thank God, Julian breathed, rushing toward her. You have to help me. Maya tricked me. She owns the debt. You have to call your dad. Write her a check. Buy out her equity. Do whatever it takes. Chloe looked at me, her eyes narrowing. She stepped back from Julian, adjusting her Lululemon jacket. My father? She asked, a strange caution entering her voice. Julian, my money is tied up in trusts. You know I can't just write a check for millions of dollars on a Tuesday. Stop lying, Chloe, Julian yelled, grabbing her shoulders. You told me your family was Texas oil money. You said you had liquid assets. I need them now. Get your hands off me, she shrieked, shoving him away. I'm not giving you a dime. This is your mess. You fix it. I cleared my throat. The sound cut through their argument like a knife. Actually, Chloe, I said, picking up a remote control. You couldn't give him a dime even if you wanted to. Why is that? She snapped. I clicked a button. The projector screen behind me hummed as it lowered. A photograph flashed onto the screen. It was a mugshot. A younger, dark-haired Chloe, looking sullen and angry. This is Chloe Jenkins, I announced to the room. Arrested 6 years ago in Ohio for wire fraud and identity theft. She isn't an oil heiress. She's a con artist. Her father is an auto mechanic in Cleveland who hasn't spoken to her in a decade. Chloe's face drained of all color. She stared at the screen, then at Julian, whose jaw was practically on the floor. You lied? Julian whispered. You said you were high society. You said we were a power family. And you believed it because you're a greedy idiot, Chloe screamed, dropping the facade entirely. Her voice lost its polished, elite cadence, slipping into something much harsher. You were an easy mark, Julian. You wanted so badly to pretend you were old money that you didn't even run a background check on your own sister-in-law. I clicked the remote again. An audio file began playing over the boardroom speakers. It was Chloe's voice, clear and crisp, talking to Preston Hayes. Julian, that idiot, thinks he's a genius. Wait until the wire hits. I'll invoice him for $6 million. As soon as the money is offshore, I'll give you the rest of the code. The room was dead silent. Julian looked like he had been shot. He stared at Chloe with a mixture of pure hatred and devastation. You were robbing me? He croaked. You were sleeping with Preston Hayes? I was taking what was mine. Chloe yelled back. Neurocore is a sinking ship. I was just securing my seat on a lifeboat. I nodded to Montgomery. He signaled the police officers. They stepped out of the shadows. The handcuffs glinted under the fluorescent lights. Chloe Jenkins, the lead detective said, stepping forward. We have a federal warrant for your arrest. Charges include corporate espionage, wire fraud, and grand larceny. We also have the routing numbers for the offshore transfer you initiated yesterday. Chloe tried to run. She literally lunged for the door, her expensive sneakers squeaking on the carpet. But the second officer was faster. He grabbed her arm, spun her around, and clicked the cuffs onto her wrists. No! She screamed, thrashing wildly. You can't do this. I am a VIP. You're a felon, I corrected calmly. And you're going to federal prison for a very long time. As they dragged her away, kicking and screaming, she locked eyes with me. You set me up, she hissed. You knew! I watched her go, feeling nothing but the cold satisfaction of a job finished. 1 down. I turned back to Julian. He was standing alone in the middle of the room, shivering. The reality of his situation had finally crushed him. His company was gone. His money was gone. His elite family ally was a criminal. And his wife, the woman he threw away like garbage, was the one holding the hammer. He looked at me, and his legs finally gave out completely. He collapsed onto his knees, right there on the plush carpet of the office he used to rule. Maya, he sobbed, tears streaming down his face. She played me. She made me do it. I stood up and walked around the table. I stood over him, looking down at the top of his head. She didn't make you throw me out in the rain, Julian, I said softly. She didn't make you tell me I was too plain to be your wife. She didn't make you cheat on me for 6 months. You did that all on your own, because you thought you were better than me. I'm sorry, he blubbered, reaching out to grasp the hem of my trousers. I didn't mean it. We can fix this. I'll fire Sloan. I'll sign whatever you want. Just don't take the company. It's my life. It's not your life anymore, I said, taking a step back out of his reach. It's my asset, and I'm liquidating it. Suddenly, the doors flew open again. In rushed Eleanor, my mother-in-law. Her hair was a mess, her makeup smeared. She must have heard the news in the lobby. She saw her son crying on the floor and me standing over him. Maya! She shrieked, dropping to her knees next to him. What are you doing? How can you be so cruel? We're family. Family? I laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound. Family doesn't force you into a maid's uniform on their birthday, Eleanor. Family doesn't make you scrub floors while they eat cake. She stared at me, wide-eyed. But we took you in. We gave you a life. You gave me nothing, I shouted, my voice finally cracking, filling the room with the thunder of a decade of silence. I gave you everything. I paid your mortgage when Julian was broke. I cooked your meals. I cleaned your house. And you treated me like a dog. I took a deep breath, smoothing my jacket. And now, I am collecting on the debt. Eleanor, remember when you told me I didn't fit your status? You were right. My status is ownership. Your status is evicted. What? She whispered. I own the house, Eleanor. The mortgage was part of the debt package. I am initiating foreclosure today. You have 24 hours to vacate. You can't, she wailed. It's my home. Where will we go? I don't know, I said, turning my back on them. Maybe a shelter. I hear they give out uniforms. You'll fit right in. I walked back to the table and picked up my folio. Julian, I said without looking back. The Rivian has been repossessed. The corporate cards are dead. But I did leave you one thing at the front desk. He looked up, a pathetic glimmer of hope in his eyes. What? Money? A check? No, I said. A box. The soggy cardboard box you threw at me. It has your clothes in it. Good luck, Julian. It's raining outside. I walked out of the boardroom, Montgomery right behind me. Behind me, I could hear their wailing a chorus of regrets that came far too late. I walked through the office, past the employees who looked at me with a mix of awe and terror. I didn't stop. I walked out of the building and into the bright New York sun. 1 year later, the midday sun warmed my face as I sat on a bench outside a newly renovated brick building in Astoria, Queens. The sign above the door read, the Arthur Sterling Innovation Center. It wasn't a tech conglomerate anymore. I had dissolved NeuroCore, liquidated the toxic assets, and used the capital to build something real. This building, which used to be my father's barbershop, was now an incubator. We provided seed money, legal counsel, and mentorship to young women from the boroughs who had brilliant ideas but no access to capital. We were building a generation of CEOs who looked exactly like me. I watched a group of teenage girls walk out of a coding seminar, laughing and debating algorithms. They walked with their heads held high, knowing their worth. Excuse me, ma'am. I looked up. A man was standing there, holding a bucket of soapy water and a squeegee. He was wearing a gray jumpsuit with a peeling name tag. He looked old, tired, and broken. It was Julian. He didn't recognize me at first. I was wearing oversized sunglasses, reading a book. But then I pulled the glasses down. He froze. The squeegee dripped dirty water onto his boots. Maya, he whispered. Hello, Julian, I said calmly. He looked at the building, looked at my car, parked at the curb a solid executive-class Mercedes, and looked at his own reflection in the glass he was cleaning. I heard you open this place, he said, his voice raspy. It's nice. Thank you, I said. I'm working at the commercial wash down the street, he mumbled, gesturing vaguely. Just trying to get back on my feet. It's tough. Nobody in tech will hire me. Reputation. Yeah, he said, looking at the pavement. It's hard to wash off. He shifted his weight. Chloe got 5 years. She's at Danbury Federal. You know. I know, I said. I sent her a postcard. He looked down at his boots again. Maya, I miss you. Not the money. Just having someone in my corner. I made a mistake. I know that now. I looked at him. I searched myself for any feeling at all. Anger, pity, love. There was nothing. Only the mild indifference you feel toward a stranger on the street. You didn't make a mistake, Julian, I said, standing up. You showed me exactly who you were, and I'm grateful for it. If you hadn't thrown me out, I never would have found the key. I turned to walk into the center. Wait, he called out. Do you think your dad would have forgiven me? I stopped in the doorway. I looked up at the large portrait of Arthur Sterling hanging in the lobby. He was smiling, a pair of barber shears in his hand. My dad was a forgiving man, Julian, I said. But he was also a businessman. And he knew how to recognize a bad investment when he saw one. I walked inside, and the heavy glass door clicked shut between us. I didn't look back to watch him wash the windows of the empire I built. I walked to the reception desk, where a young intern named Elena was waiting. Miss Sterling, the board is ready for you, she said, smiling. Thank you, Elena, I said. I walked into the meeting, my father's black metal card tucked safely in my pocket, resting right over my heart. I had taken back my name. I had taken back my life, and I had built a foundation that no storm could ever wash away.